Hello everyone! My name is Aaron Christensen, and this is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, a gathering place for fellow fiends the world over to discuss all things freaky and frightening. If you want to be part of the conversation, and I hope you do, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, maybe go back and check out some of our previous episodes, leave a comment, and most importantly, let us know the fright flicks you'd like to discuss in the future. That kind of connection is exactly what we're looking for, and it really does make a difference. We're all about sharing the scare, and we want to hear from you. After a British cruiser is sunk by a German U-boat in the waning days of World War I, the remaining survivors, led by square-jawed American Bowen Tyler, turn the tables on their aggressors, floating in a lifeboat until the sub surfaces and taking the Jerrys by surprise. As food supplies dwindle, an uneasy truce is drawn after they happen upon a mythical, uncharted island named Caprona, which boasts all manner of evolution, from dinosaurs to cavemen. This 1975 adventure outing from British studio Amicus marked a shift in gears from their usual horror fare, which had gained considerable ground thanks to their wave of anthology flicks such as Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, Asylum, Tales from the Crypt, and Torture Garden. While some of the prehistoric heavies, created by special effects artist Roger Dicken, require more than a little suspension of disbelief, the overall charm and sturdy cast gusto dealing with the more fantastic elements sell this bucket of corn right down the line. Special notice goes out to John McHenry's turn as the fair-minded U-boat captain, and the lovely Susan Penhaligon, who genre fans might recognize from Patrick and The Confessional, being presented as an intelligent and capable member of the group instead of a mere damsel in distress. Relatively faithful to the 1918 Edgar Rice Burroughs story, the success of this nostalgic treat led to 3 more adventure tales from Amicus: The People That Time Forgot, At the Earth's Core, and Warlords of Atlantis. All were directed by Kevin Connor, who began his career under the studio's banner with From Beyond the Grave, and all featuring former TV star Doug McClure. The quartet played in heavy rotation on independent channels throughout the 1970s and 80s, lodging forever in the hearts of dinosaur-loving kids of all ages, and remain ripe for rediscovery by a new generation. It's time for Doug and the Dinos, and we've got an awesome panel to chat about them with me. So let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Barry Kaufman.
Great to be here.
Darren Callahan.
Hello.
Alan Trump.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be on board.
And Eli LaChance.
Hi, guys. Glad to be here screwing things up.
And we are here to chat about The Land That Time Forgot from 1975. And along the way, we'll chat about some other of the Amicus Dino films, such as At the Earth's Core, The People That Time Forgot, and Warlords of Atlantis. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy, and a welcome. I am very excited. This is one of those, I actually watched these movies recently on a Saturday afternoon, and I was like, this is the quintessential Saturday afternoon matinee kiddie fare, and I immediately felt like I was 9 years old again. So that's kind of my origin story. That's how I came to these movies, was on TV. I never saw them in the theaters, but I'm curious to hear what other people's origin stories, how did they come into contact with these Amicus prehistoric and fantastic, I guess, creations. Barry, why don't we kick things off with you?
I was fortunate that, I saw Land That Time Forgot when it first came out at a kiddie matinee.
Nice.
And they had a guy dressed up in a dinosaur suit, which was in a Tyrannosaurus suit, floppy, sort of, like kind of like the last dinosaur, Toto's last dinosaur kind of suit.
Oh my God.
It looked pretty good, actually. And they were giving out little stickers. I don't know where they got them. I don't know if they made them or if they were from, I didn't see them in the press book, but little Land That Time Forgot stickers. And I saw it at the theater, but then 3 years later, I didn't see the other films. I missed them for some reason at the time. And then they were shown at the drive-in, a triple feature of At the Earth's Core, Land That Time Forgot, and People That Time Forgot. So it wasn't a kiddie matinee, but I went to the drive-in with a friend of mine who was older and had a car, and we saw all of those. And that was spectacular to see. And what was interesting at the drive-in for that film, the drive-ins can be a little rowdy. People get kind of wild and stuff's going on. They're distracted. That was probably one of the quietest drive-in settings I've ever seen. People were really watching the films, and there were a lot of kids there. There were a lot of kids there for the drive-in, and a lot of fun picnic stuff going on. But that was a really great environment to see these movies, all I can remember at the time when I saw Land of Time Forgot and these films is that I was pretty critical back then. You may know, Aaron, from reading some of my old I was a little hypercritical. I thought I was a mini, Roger Ebert or something, or Leonard Maltin, worse yet. But these movies, I just found them so engaging and so delightful. And I was like doing things with miniatures and models and dioramas, and like the diorama sensibility of the special effects in a lot of these films. I just thought they were charming and beautiful films at the time. I still think so, but that was just a wonderful introduction for me.
I'm so glad you brought up The Last Dinosaur, because I thought the Allosaurus in this one very much reminded me of that dinosaur. I was like, wait a second, I've seen
which I thought was funny because it looked way more like The Last Dinosaur, but then I saw the film, like, no wonder, because that is, it looks like there's some I'll talk about later, maybe some like riffs on certain other films or things in there.
Yeah,
here and there. Yeah, exactly.
Darren, how about you?
I've just spent the last few decades just wondering why this isn't mentioned in the same breath as Chinatown. Any other classics?
Rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly
Why not The Conversation, Chinatown, Jaws, and then this? I mean, I don't really understand it. Yeah, I saw it as a kid on television. I don't think I saw it in the theater, but I was very, very young. I guess it's possible that I got taken to a matinee, but it is absolutely, as you said, a great Saturday afternoon sort of kid film experience.
Alan, how about you?
For The Land of Time Forgot, I do remember the saturation TV commercials for it showing up when I was visiting my grandma in Painesville, Ohio, or Fairport Harbor, Ohio. I'm sorry. And by the time I said, look at these great dinosaurs in this. And by the time we got back to where we lived in St. Louis, the movie had already moved on, so I didn't get to see it then. So didn't get to see it until the CBS late night movies. Was lucky enough to see Warlords of Atlantis at a drive-in. Saw At the Earth's Core in a theater, but I had to wait for Commander USA's program to see The People that Time Forgot.
And Eli.
So I'm going to be a little bit different from the group. If I saw this as a kid, it sort of just got absorbed into the background cultural radiation that became my sort of media sensibilities. But the first time I remember seeing this movie was on Comet TV. Right after I got out of college, I used to get home after work, and I would watch Comet TV all night back when they had movies during the night and not TV shows during the night. And this was just a delightful movie that came on there one night, and there was no way I was going to miss a dinosaur movie. So,
and Eli, you're an amateur paleontologist. I'm going to be talking what your professional estimation of these dinosaurs is.
We're not; they're barely dinosaurs. I don't. Some of them. We'll do it. We'll get there.
Let's do it now. Because I'm pretty impressed with the fact that we have quite the spectrum of dinosaurs on display. I think we have like 9 different species, if you pick them all out.
Right. We have, let's see, I remember there's pterosaurs of some kind. I think they call them pterodactyls, but that's not even a real thing. There's a Diplodocus. There's the Allosaurus, what looks like a Ceratosaurus. It's never named, so we just kind of have to roll with it. There's a Triceratops, once again, not named. It just looks like one. There's a Kentrosaurus, and then there are several named Styracosaurs.
Yep. And there's a Mosasaur too, right?
There's a Plesiosaur. Yeah, that's right. It's a Plesiosaur because they talk about cooking it. How do you like your Plesiosaur? The chef confessed ignorance on how to prepare such a beast. That's like my favorite line in the whole movie.
If we're all dino kids, and I imagine we were at some point, this is quite the array of dinosaurs, and they're not stop motion. They're kind of like a mixture of puppetry. I like them. I like kind of how tactile they feel. And during some of the encounters, you actually like they blow off the Styracosaurus's horns. You get some genuine like, hey, they're just being dinosaurs. You're at their place. What are you doing blowing them up?
It cries.
And if I'm not mistaken, during that scene, one of the Styracosaurs gets killed, and the other one, its mate, just sort of looks in horror and then just wanders away. It's very
Yeah.
I have to say that the choice in the script to eat the first dinosaur they find is pretty disgusting and probably not very healthy. But at the same time, it's a great screenwriting trick because you think of them more as fully realized fleshy creatures for the rest of the thing, even though they're, guys in rubber costumes and puppetry. But like that eating of the first dinosaur that they really have an encounter with is a spectacularly bold choice.
Yeah, the dinosaur eating is actually. Well, I actually have to. It's not a dinosaur. Plesiosaurs weren't dinosaurs. But
What are they, Eli?
They're marine reptiles. They're plesiosaurs. I think that
I'm glad you're
that
here,
one,
Eli.
since it had a long neck, would be considered an elasmosaur of some variety. But I was
Still
gonna
not
say,
eating it.
well, I would eat it. Well, I'm actually vegan. I wouldn't eat. Well, I might if I got a chance to eat a dinosaur break. But anyway,
And if you're
I'm
on
down
a
for it.
submarine, you're probably going to eat it anyway because you haven't eaten anything in a while that
That's
wasn't
true.
like a cracker.
But that's the thing in the book. The first creature they encounter is a plesiosaur, and they eat it just like it had. The movie is very faithful to the book. The book is boring to read if you do what I did and watch the movie and then read the book the next day.
Well, and this is it was sanctioned by the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. They were working very closely with them. And the way this film kind of came to be was Milton Subotsky and Max Rosenberg of Amicus. And it was funny, the timestamp on this, because Hammer had pretty much just folded at this point. And so Amicus was kind of standing alone, and Amicus had risen up as kind of a major rival to Hammer. And for them to still be around years after Hammer had hung it up, I thought I just hadn't clicked for me how much longer Amicus hung around.
Well, I do know that at the time, Milton Subotsky in particular was looking to do more Hollywood style, adventure films. They were looking to branch out into something that may have a wider appeal than horror films. They did see the writing on the wall, at least Milton Subotsky did, although to his credit, to their credit, both of them, unlike Hammer as much in terms of producers, both of them actually really did like horror films, That's why they were enthusiastic about it, but they thought they needed to branch out and go into something that had a wider appeal. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Milton Subotsky had seen some work of Derek Medding's, and he met him. I think he actually asked to talk to him and said, well, we're thinking about this. What do you think? And he was very enthusiastic because Milton Subotsky said, well, we got a low budget. But you did, I forgot what the reference was for what he saw, but he said, you did this on a low budget. Can you do this? And he was enthusiastic and said, we're going to have a bunch of dinosaurs. You can help us to figure out, from the book, what they're going to look like. And so I think that's how it generated. But they were definitely looking to do something different because they were wily. They never had a studio. They never really were a studio, unlike Hammer. But they were wily in that they understood that the horror films that they were making were not going to have the wide appeal that they needed to survive.
And they didn't survive much longer than this.
No, they only survived for 4 years, I think, but they tried. It was a valiant try.
They remind me a lot of this company here in Los Angeles called the Asylum. The Asylum is like a Roger Corman studio, low budget, 3 or 4 owners, picture by picture. Now their thing is, aside from the Sharknado franchise, which was very successful for them, their thing is, exploitation films and often films that take off on other films. But sort of the aesthetic of it, the ethos of it feels like Amicus, although Amicus had the benefit of having some better stars and some slightly bigger budgets and working in the era of film. So the things look nicer over time, where the Asylum was very digital based. But there's still companies around trying to be like Amicus and New World Pictures, and it still exists. And I just admire the hell out of that. I mean, the ambition of a movie like this is actually quite extraordinary, or any of the others we might talk about for a low budget studio. When you compare that to a film, an early Amicus film like City of the Dead, also known as Horror Hotel, which was clearly shot on a nickel, but very good. It's one of my favorite 60s horror films. But this is a pretty big budget for a small film. This is a pretty big, ambitious project for a small film. I mean, even the acquiring of a submarine could be a giant nightmare. So kudos to Amicus. Good job.
Wasn't it like a $250,000 budget, something like that at the time, I believe?
It was a big swing for them.
Yes.
And they were looking to reach like you said, they were looking to reach a bigger, more populist audience. And John Dark, the producer, he had been the associate producer for several of smaller films with Amicus, including From Beyond the Grave, which featured our director, Kevin Connor. They kind of pulled a lot of people together. Like you said, Derek
Meddings. Yeah.
Meddings, thank you.
He did all the Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker and shit.
And he did Superman too, I think. But then Roger Dicken is the one who does the dinosaurs. And so they pulled that together, and then they found their star in Doug McClure. You know, McClure had been a star on television on the Virginian TV show. Between this film, At the Earth's Core, People That Time Forgot, and Humanoids from the Deep, I was like, Doug McClure is my favorite actor of all time.
Yeah, I too, even as a youngster, thought Doug McClure was really charismatic. Now seeing him, he's definitely lightweight. Like there's not the gravitas I thought, but as a youngster, let's say up to the age of 10, he had a thing. I don't know, he had a thing, and he does it in this movie. Humanoids from the Deep, it's kind of funny. He's at the mercy of everything that goes on in Humanoids of the Deep, where here he's more of an actor. I don't mean acting, but like he's more of a plot driver. But he is heroic, and he's holding his own, and he does in other Amicus movies become sort of a fixture in a way that you want to see him reappear, which is weird because I don't really think of myself as a Doug McClure fan. And I see one of these movies and I'm like, legit, I was into it when I was 8. I was like, who's that Doug McClure guy? He's pretty cool.
Well,
He's like Clint Eastwood.
I love that he's been immortalized in a way on The Simpsons, you know, with their Troy McClure character.
Mashup of Troy Donahue and Doug McClure.
He kind of won me over in the film. His character won me over in the film right at the beginning when he grabbed one of the evil World War I German soldiers and said, "Come and see here." So, one thing I will mention, you know, talking about the backstory, I don't know a lot about if they were trying to ride the coattails of dinosaur films or anything like that. I will mention that the script was written by my favorite fantasy author, Michael Moorcock, and his illustrator friend, James Cathorn. Moorcock started out his writing career by writing for a small magazine called Tarzan Adventures. And so he was an incredible Edgar Rice Burroughs fan. So if you were going to get somebody to write like you said, fairly faithful adaptation of a Burroughs novel, this is the guy you'd want to get.
Well, and I wonder if maybe the estate wasn't key in that putting all those pieces together.
Yeah. Not to give you too off the track here, but one of my good friends, very talented man, is Raymond Benson, lives in Chicago. He took over the writing of the James Bond series from John Gardner. And the reason he did it was the Fleming Foundation really liked some nonfiction books he wrote about Bond. So they thought, hey, you can write this fiction, Die Another Day, World Is Not Enough, right? Totally delivered it. His books are wonderful additions to the James Bond franchise. But this shows me how a legacy literary owner can like hand the baton off to a trusted author. And that's probably what happened here. The Edgar Rice Burroughs group, which is highly credited in the film, probably was like that guy, Michael Moorcock. He knows our jam. And actually, I wish that'd be more present now, because you see a movie like Halloween 2018, you want to blow your fucking head off. So I kind of wish that like they would pick somebody who knew something about the legacy of that property, you know, make it a little better.
Well, and I think one of the things that makes this film work is how kind of grounded it feels. I mean, the first half hour is a straight ahead adventure on a sub, cat and mouse, you know, trading off back and forth. It starts off in, I think it's 1916, and there is a U-boat that sinks a freighter that's carrying civilians, but also explosives, you know, in the war effort. And the survivors from that explosion get on a lifeboat and head over, and they find the sub as it surfaces, and they end up taking it over. And then there's this kind of whole like back and forth in terms of who's going to win the day in the sub.
Yeah, I don't know if it's name checked, but it feels like Crimson Tide for the first 45 minutes, because it is control of the submarine. That is literally the only plot. There's no dinosaurs. There's no land that anyone forgot. But I love the fact that, I love the fact that it begins as a World War I sort of first rivalry turning into détente, turning into rivalry. And you don't really pick a side. They don't talk the politics of it. And it is World War I, not World War II. So there's different sort of dynamics at play there. There's no Nazis, but I like that. I like that about it. It feels like it could have never gone to the dinosaur thing, and it would still be kind of a cool on a submarine, run silent, run deep action film.
Well, and I think that was like, it grounds the film so that when we get to the fantasy elements, we're invested. we're buying into it. We know all the characters, we know who we identify with. And I liked, as a kid, I liked the fact that it was an adult film. Like, there was a bunch of adults doing adult things, and they encountered dinosaurs. It took itself seriously. Even as a kid, I didn't like it when movies were kind of like winking at you, or like, here's your kiddie show, like Dinosaurus or something like that.
Well, I was trying to remember, there was a television show in the 70s.
Land of the Lost.
Land. Yeah, I was going to say it had land in the title.
Land of the Lost.
Land of the Lost.
Yeah.
Not related to this in any way, but that's sort of a kiddie version.
Bit.
Well,
but yes, that kind of flavors what this kind of went against.
The first 45 minutes of this, I wouldn't equate it with the Dirty Dozen or Kelly's Heroes or something, but it feels more like, I don't know, a 60s war film than it does something like Land of the Lost.
Well, I will say, not to get off track, in defense of Land of the Lost, it was made as a kiddie show by Sid and Marty Krofft.
Right.
They had some very good writers, and they had some very elevated concepts on that show. You would not expect to see in a kiddie film, so I have to give them some credit there. And it's funny because, not to get off track again, but when I see the caveman in this film, Land of Time Forgot, I thought of Chaka in Land of the Lost, and how I think Chaka is actually portrayed better than the caveman in this film. That kind of veers the film off a little bit, I think, to a little bit of silliness that the rest of the film, like you said, Aaron, doesn't really have that. It doesn't have that kind of pandering feel.
You're not buying into the caveman?
No, I think he had a foot fetish when he wanted everybody to take off their shoes and was looking at their feet, and somehow he knew that oil was really valuable and got excited about it.
Maybe you guys feel this. Feels to me like a sort of a tribute to the Planet of the Apes movies. Like the way he acts and interacts feels like it's something from Planet of the Apes.
The other performance I really enjoy, well, there's two. Susan Penhaligon, who plays Lisa. I think she's really terrific. And I knew her from, I knew her from this movie. This is, what cemented her in my brain. But then she shows up in the Pete Walker film. I think it's The Confessional, right?
Oh, my. Okay.
John McHenry, who plays Captain von Schoenvorts, which I just love how McClure's like, von Schoenvorts, like he just sneers that line. His name, I love that.
Do you think though there's good acting in the film? I mean, and this is not like a slam. This is a legitimate question.
I think McHenry does a really fine job. He was Mercutio in Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, and so while he is a long way from that, it's not Shakespeare here, but I think he does provide a nice grounded and I think a really interesting character who is straddling the line between, being a German soldier, but also being someone who's curious about nature and is interested in, keeping the dynamic together for the greater good. I think he does a really fine job of balancing that, as opposed to McClure, who's pretty straight ahead, and Halligan doesn't have a lot of opportunity to express a lot. So I think McHenry is our most complex character.
Yeah, I can see that.
I was interested in seeing in Wikipedia, just looking at the entry on this, that actor's voice was dubbed by Anton Differing, which is, I guess they thought Differing had a more melodious tone or something.
He might have had a better accent too.
Yep.
I don't want to blow this when we get to At the Earth's Core, which we might name check here, but is that Peter Cushing's real voice?
And At the Earth's Core?
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
I was really confused by
As
that.
controversial as that might be, yes.
All right. Just wanted to put that out there.
We can move into At the Earth's Core and lean back into Land of Time Forgot, but Peter Cushing is having so much fun. I don't know that he ever had as much fun on a movie as he seems to be having in At the Earth's Core.
That performance gets such a bad rap, from fandom, from critics, a lot of critics and things like that. But I think it's great for several reasons. Peter Cushing was having a very difficult time during this period, obviously, with his wife's death. And he aged, 20 years, from 1971 to 1976. And it's nice to see him having such a good time and getting into a role. And yeah, a couple things. I mean, there's a couple pratfally things and stuff that aren't really becoming of him, but the character I think is played really well. His comic timing is good, and he serves the purpose. And I heard that he was the engine on the set for having a good time with the film, which is that kind of a film. It's a lighter film, and he was the engine for everybody having a good time. And I thought one of the funniest things in the film that he did And I don't know if this was a direct reference, but it seemed like it was stolen when the Mahars, the giant birds, are hypnotizing everybody. And he says, you can't hypnotize me. I'm British.
Yeah.
But that's a direct throwback to Horror Express.
Horror Express,
where
yeah.
he says, monsters? We're not monsters. We're British.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like intentional, but it's exactly the same line and intonation. But I do love his performance, and I love him anyway. But maybe it's that personal bias. But I think it fits into the film just fine. You know.
Here's my thought, because I know we're not totally switching gears away from Land That Time Forgot yet, but I watched all of them that we might reference here of that quadrilogy of films. And I have to say, it made me appreciate Land That Time Forgot more, seeing the others, because it was a legitimate exercise in attempting to really wow you. And, you know, this is a horror podcast, and it had horrific elements, but it's an adventure film. So if you look at a series of adventure films in the way we might look at Moby Dick or something, Jurassic Park, I don't know. It was a very satisfying, entertaining sort of adventure film. The other ones are absolutely in the same category. They're not total misses or anything, but yeah, man, this one is definitely made me appreciate it more seeing the others.
No, and I agree. I think that this is the most mature and the most fully realized of the four films. This one feels like it is a film that kids can enjoy, that adults can enjoy. It feels like it really is for general audiences. Whereas At the Earth's Core and People at Time Forgot, they feel a little bit more juvenile. Like They feel like they are gearing toward that younger crowd.
And Land That Time Forgot, you know, to its credit, has a pretty brilliant framing device with the submarine stuff and the realism at the beginning, and then the sort of symmetry at the end, and then a very haunting and unexpected sort of like finish, very deep, you know. So I mean, that may be again credit to the writer, as Darren was saying, you know, to Moorcock, and you know his seriousness about the subject matter. And he, of course, wasn't happy with the film. No writer ever is. No science fiction writer is ever happy. Richard Matheson, whoever. But I think really to capture the book, as Eli, you were talking before the podcast that, you know, you have read it. I read it when I was a kid. And of course, I guess I'll always say this, but I thought the film was better than the book. It's more exciting than the book. But
well, I think the film's absolutely better than the book. The book was the extra homework I did. I didn't get to all the other movies. I read the book. And it's interesting that you talk about like the framing device and the bleak ending, because the book totally ruins that. They insert a narrator in the opening of the book to let you know that I have found this message in a thermos, and I am going to now read it to you. And it's like, why wouldn't you just give us the letter and let us find out that's what we were reading the whole time at the end? That would have been a lot more interesting of a move. Not that I'm going to tell Edgar Rice Burroughs how to
take
write.
it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that guy's a hack, right? The differences in the movie are interesting, though. There are a few of them, but there are some big ones, like the young lady. What's her name? Lee, I think. Is
Lisa.
Her name? Lisa. Yeah, I think they call her Lee in the book. She is engaged to von Schlorper.
Von Schornvort.
Von Schornvort. Yeah. She's engaged to him, and they just happen to get on the submarine, and it's like Dickens level coincidence. Like, oh no, that's the German I told you about that I am engaged to. It's like, oh, okay, cool. That makes things a lot more interesting. But those are like the big differences.
I did like that Lisa in the movie, the romantic angle, which, you know, it's kind of hinted at, particularly when the two are stranded, but it didn't really come to pass, which I like. You know, she was just another character who was fighting the same terrors they all were.
Well, and she does a pretty decent job of holding her own as a character, at least for the first part of the movie. I think toward the end, she kind of becomes the damsel in distress who just kind of stands around and watches everything happen. But, you know, I like the fact that she shoots one of the German sailors in defense of
that was a good
Tyler.
scene. Mm-hmm.
And she's a biologist, so she's right in there. You know,
she's not a biologist in the book. She is just a damsel.
I'm going to pull a weird apple out here, but like the movie There Will Be Blood is a modern movie, but the book Oil was written in the 30s, you can tell there's a difference in point of view based on the time. There's different highlights, different heroes, different situations, different sexism, different everything, and it makes you admire To Kill a Mockingbird even more, because you're like, oh yeah, you were on the right side of history with that one. So
December 1918.
1918. Okay.
So
all right. I mean, there was nothing really offensive in Land That Time Forgotten. I'm sure the book's the same way for the most part.
No, it's offensive. The entire last third of it is deeply offensive. I mean, the sexism is pretty offensive. The racism, oh boy.
Okay, all right. That's off the charts then. All right. Let's rise above that. But yeah, I thought it was nice to see a female heroine in the mid 1970s who was right there alongside doing great things with everybody, and not just somebody who would be rescued from lava.
Well, and we kind of saw something similar with Sarah Douglas in People That Time Forgot. Like she does hold her own pretty respectably. She does have to be rescued at least once, but she's the one who comes up with the idea of like pulling the plane with the Stegosaurus. She's the one who's taking the photographs, so that they have evidence to bring back. These films do at least, they give us a little eye candy in the form of Carolyn Monroe and our other actor who's in People That Time Forgot, who are asked to run about scantily clad. But then they give us a few people who are, relatively stable.
Thinking of People That Time Forgot and my earlier mention of Planet of the Apes, it's very similar to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where 2/3 through the movie, they come across the main character.
Right. Who they have gone back to find in the first place,
Yes. And even though James Franciscus knows who Taylor is, he's not specifically there to find Taylor, but at least I don't think so.
No, he is. And Beneath the Planet of the Apes, that the whole mission is to go get Taylor.
Point being, People That Time Forgot. It's similar kind of thing where that structure exists. I wonder if it was taken from there, because that one is also based on a Burroughs book, though. So maybe not, because that one is also
People That Time Forgot is a Burroughs book.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Never mind. So I'll blame Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
They stole from Burroughs.
Okay. All right. Find out who the criminal is. But anyway, point being, very similar in that. I wonder, there's a third book, right? They didn't make a third book.
Or a third movie?
Well, there's a third Bryce Burroughs book. I don't know if it's their third movie. Is that maybe because they just ran out of cash or something? I don't know.
And I will show something. This is for those Edgar Rice Burroughs fans out here. Let me know if you could see this. This is from an excellent book called An Atlas of Fantasy.
Nice.
And this is a picture of Edgar Rice Burroughs himself, illustration for the island of Caprona.
Ah,
that's cool.
And thank you for name checking Caprona, because that is something that I will to this day shout out when I'm in distress. I'll be like, Caprona has won.
I do love the idea of a lost place, a lost island. I think that is a great ripe place for adventure. Obviously movies like Jungle Cruise, even like they try to use that is a cliche now, but it's still cool, man. I always love the idea of some sort of Shangri-La type other place where things happen that don't make sense in our world, but it is physically placed on planet Earth. That's a very fascinating idea.
I like the fact that this island, it follows a timeline. If you continue to move north, you move through time. And actually, if you continue to move forward, like is going to turn into a different form.
Yeah, did anyone understand the science of the Land That Time Forgot? Because I've seen this movie 3 times now, and now I've read the book, and there's like a thing going on with how they reproduce in that puddle where everyone's naked and looks like.
Yes, I don't get that at all, man.
I have no idea what's happening.
You notice they rushed through that and they had naked women there to just distract you.
The only boob shot in the whole movie is that giant, very phallic white liquid thing. I wonder what they were going for there. Yeah, it's weird. And by the way, Eli and I were on a great Horror 101 podcast talking about the bullshit science of The Fly. So you should check out that.
That was a really great talk. That was like one of the most fun one of these things that I have been.
That
really
was great
so far.
So this is obviously from that same
some
school
more
of
bullshit
thought.
science, exactly.
Exactly.
There's no bullshit science here.
But
It's all real.
but
Alan
they do-
Trump is here getting blasted by a nuclear bomb every 30 seconds.
Yeah, like
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what
It's
No,
very
it's the real
exciting.
science.
It's a great way to like pull attention to the fact that you're not talking.
Well, I've mentioned in other podcasts that they refined the uranium for the Manhattan Project here in St. Louis. So probably just a little bit of residue left over. So I apologize for that. If I start, my gums start bleeding soon, you know that's what it is too.
That's when we'll just zoom in.
There you go.
All science is real here.
Yeah.
Very serious scientists.
Let's talk a little bit about At the Earth's Core, because it does, as we mentioned, it features Peter Cushing alongside Doug McClure, and it has the iron mole that like digs into the earth and then through a mishap starts heading directly down into the earth and kind of like has to like shovel its way around. And it finds this kind of like little oasis beneath the earth's surface where all sorts of animals and people and wild shenanigans carry on.
Funny thing that when I first saw the film, maybe everybody will agree with me, you see this mole and they have different models of it. One of them was like 500 pounds that actually was in a museum in Britain. They found it and restored it and put it in a museum there, but it looked really good. And those effects, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This looks real. This is crazy. And not real enough, you know, I mean, so it was really just fantastic looking. And I thought, wow. And then the rest of the film, what you see, which is still fine with me, does not live up to that. You know, so there's an expectation when you see that, wow, this is so well crafted. They went to so much trouble to do this. And I wonder why they put so much energy into that. And then the other effects, well, they did what they could, you know, and there's some lovely sets and some whatever nice paintings and stuff, but it just doesn't match that.
Just to clarify, and I forget this fact, Derek Meddings was not involved at all in At the Earth's Core, right?
That's
I do
correct.
not think so. I do not think so, no.
Yeah, he was not.
Okay. All right.
I think he did. I think he did come back for Warlords of Atlantis.
He did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it feels very Go Thunderbirds Go, you know, with the technology there. But yeah, it works. It works. You're right.
I have to admit that of all these movies, I think the monster design in At the Earth's Core are my favorite, even though they're the furthest from reality. But you got the fire breathing things down there, and you got the giant sort of rhinoceros dinosaurs that are always fighting.
They're like fighting each other.
Yeah, and you've got of course Carolyn Munro, you know, and her.
I know, what an animal.
Yes, beyond the beautiful. So
no, but it is the most kaiju-like of these films.
Yeah,
and Warlords of Atlantis has some of that too, for sure. But that has it too. But this is very kaiju-like in its presentation, you know, which is exciting. I mean, visually, it's exciting. It is, yeah.
Well, and I think like it and Warlords are very fanciful.
Yeah.
In that, like, I mean, I was watching Warlords and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, it feels like you could watch it as a 6-year-old and just be like, of course, like this, you need to have 6-year-old logic to just go along with it. Because every 5 minutes, I'm like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Like, who are you people?
You know, I'll take this point to revert back to the 70s version of Darren Callahan. My father, who passed away in 1980, he was a movie fan and he got me into movies. And he used to take me and my brother to movies quite often. We were watching a movie. The action scenes were amazing. And then the talking scenes, 6-year-old Darren Callahan was bored with. And I made a comment in the car on the way home. I liked it when they were fighting. I didn't like it when they were talking. And he said, quite wisely, you're going to feel different about that in about 10 years. And it's so true, because you do learn to appreciate the non-action moments. Even if it's a film with great action and maybe even continuous action, you'll appreciate even the action scenes more having non-action scenes. When I was watching At the Earth's Core, which I do not recall seeing as a child, although it's quite possible I did, it was action, 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 like nonstop sort of obstacles in the way of the people at the Earth's core. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, my dad was right. I could use a moment here to like kind of build character or thought or theme or something, because I did feel, and maybe that's why I feel it's so juvenile, it really was nothing but occurrences for 90 minutes. And it starts off very rapidly with them drilling into the Earth's core.
Well, I mean, and that's
rapidly with them drilling into the Earth's core.
Well, I mean, and that's the level at which Peter Cushing is playing. Like, and I feel like, you know, McClure in his own kind of like Meatloaf way is matching him in terms of that light tone. Like neither of them are taking any of it too seriously. It just seems like a kind of kiddie matinee, you know, a children's theater piece.
Yeah, but you see a movie like Star Wars, and it's, you know, George Lucas is quoted as saying it's fun to make films for kids. But Star Wars, even though it's action, and 7-year-old Darren Callahan thought it was the second coming, it really has more to it than just that.
It's grounded, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like this is completely untethered to the way adults might react to such situations. So
going back to Land That Time Forgot, it is the one that treats the audience with respect. Here's an actual story. Here are some actual performances. Here are the best special effects we can do, you know, with the budget we have. And I think there is that kind of lyrical quality of the elliptical storytelling. Like I remember thinking, you know, as a kid, like when he throws that thermos off the cliff, I was like, wow, that is poetry. And the fact that it actually gets found and the story gets to be told, like that just kind of resonated with me in a way that I was really surprised at. And I felt the same way watching it this time. We're just watching this thermos bobbing along during the opening credits. And if you know where the movie's going, you're like, that's right. It has to find its way so that the story can be told.
I was kind of thinking, is there a modern equivalent to this idea? You know, watching an Alistair MacLean movie like Where Eagles Dare, which is kind of a later day Edgar Rice Burroughs, you know, grounded in the effects of World War II, you know, where it's a male adventure for, you know, excitement factor and intrigue and adventure. I was like, what exists today that's like Land That Time Forgot or At the Earth's Core that is a pure adventure adrenaline kind of story? And nothing came to mind. You guys
that isn't also a comedy, like
it isn't something
featuring
else.
The Rock, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Fast and the Furious is very modern times or whatever. I'm trying to think like, you know, Furiosa maybe, but like not really, because it's very much for adults. So I was trying to think what inhabits this middle ground of boyhood adventure. Mm-hmm. You know, I couldn't really come to mind of anything.
It's very difficult to do today, I think, because, I mean, you can talk about some of the narrative elements as well and the way films are constructed today. But also, I think due to the visual style and special effects and the charm of that, I don't think that can be duplicated today with CGI. I mean, CGI has a different effect, certainly, but it does not have that charm and that fantasy element, the truly fantastic that you will see. I mean, CGI, I don't think can really, I mean, there's some great things about it, not to put it down, but I don't think it can be replicated. So I don't think those films have the same innocence or the same charm or anything, because I don't think you can do it today. I agree with you. I always look for that. Believe me, that's what I'm always looking for. I'm like, like the Barry Manilow song, Trying to Get the Feeling Again. You know, I'm like, let's get this feeling again. I want this feeling. I mean, that's not that they're bad films or anything, but I can't get it. And even Jurassic Park, which is an excellent film, I think Land That Time Forgot has more ideas in a lot of ways, some more depth of ideas, and I think a better like overall narrative, and even Jurassic Park does in a lot of ways, even though it's much less of an ambitious film in some ways. But
I think the word you're using that I really like is innocence, you know, and when you're a child and you enjoy things through a child's eyes, as these films were clearly meant to entertain, you want also a feeling that it's safe and that it's possible, even as extreme as it might get. With CGI, you do have the ability now to do everything realistic. I was unsure, like post Dark Knight trilogy, like everyone wants to see it for reals. But sometimes you want Flash Gordon 1980, you know, you just want it to be like charming.
I think there's a quality. So I think a lot of people, modern viewers, might unfairly scoff at the sort of special effects in this movie, but I think they are really charming. They're really like they caught me right away. There are a couple instances where I feel like they kind of phoned it in, namely the pterosaur.
This stiffest pterosaur of all time.
But I mean, but what works about it when it works is, for instance, that scene where you see the Allosauruses attack them and they're freaking Godzilla sized. which makes no sense. But they're just like foaming at the mouth, like saliva is pouring from their mouths. It gives them an animated quality to where it becomes something living and tangible. And it might not look the most realistic, but you buy the illusion, and they believed their special effects enough to make sure that they could sell you that illusion that this was real. And like these came out after the Ray Harryhausen Hammer dinosaur movies. So like nobody was under any impression that this was like, you know, the cream of the crop, right? Like, so I think that's awesome. I think what they were able to accomplish with such a light budget, I think you're totally right about the charm. Like it absolutely depends on how it's presented.
As I was watching, I kept thinking, would this still be a good gateway for younger viewers? Like, would younger viewers enjoy this? And I would like to think they would, because I think there's enough action. There's enough imagination happening on screen. Like it's the puppet show that if you do a good puppet show, the kids are going to watch it. The kids are going to be engaged by it. And they're not fooled into thinking, oh, those are actual, you know, real beings that are behind the stage, but they're entertained by it. And I would like to think at least the first couple of these films would be entertaining. I think Warlords of Atlantis is just a little too out there for kids, but I really think that this film, you know, you get invested in the characters, and then you get into the dinosaurs, and it becomes, you know, the best film of all time.
You know, since you name checked Warlords of Atlantis, I know we haven't really talked about that one too much. I just want to pivot to that for a second to say I watched Batman Begins and then watched Warlords of the Deep / Warlords of Atlantis, and the same freaking character actor showed up. He's the guy who plays in Batman Begins. He's got one line. He's like, hey, the water's coming to Wayne Tower. We need to shut it off. He's just a famous character actor. He's plays military guys mostly, but he's the water main engineer in Batman Begins. And I was like, that's that freaking guy from Warlords of Atlantis, plays like the ship's captain. And I was like, oh my God, it's so serendipitous.
You see, you know, John Ratzenberger, who also pops up in Warlords of Atlantis, and then he shows up in Motel Hell, that Kevin Conner also directed.
John Ratzenberger is a Motel Hell.
Yes, he plays one of the band members that gets buried in the ground, and they get fed. They get their throats cut, their vocal cords cut, so they can't cry out.
And that's not a Pixar film. Just checking.
Most famous for being Cliff and Cheers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love John and getting his face blown off in Bridge Too Far.
I just was going to say Warlords of Atlantis is probably my least favorite of these, but I do got to admit that one monster that kind of looks like a giant snapping turtle thing, that was kind of scary and has kind of ankylosaurus tail to it, and I thought I really liked that part. A lot of, but like you say, a lot of it seems like, I don't know, this seems like a really dull Doctor Who episode or something, but portions of it. But also at that time, I remember that Atlantis was a big thing.
Yes.
You had books by I think his name was Brad Steiger, I think, and you had L. Sprague de Camp coming out with books about it, and you had all of these fantasy novels set in it. So it was very of its time. They were really jumping on the bandwagon there.
Yeah, Quicksand and Atlantis, pretty much, you know, and Bigfoot.
Now we all got Cocaine Bear.
I did want to ask the group when the German captain of the U-boat in the original one, I was going to mention, you know, he makes that statement at the very end where we can, you know, Caprona is one because we cannot go backwards. Do you think he was making a statement about war?
I took it as a sort of examination of the nature of violence and nature. Like, there's no escaping our violent nature. We are animals. Everything's going to keep progressing, but that's still going to be there. There's no going back. There's always going to be tomorrow. If you resist tomorrow, you're going to be obliterated. I think there was something about war. It's a very Cold War kind of message that is not in the book at all. Since that's my pet trick for this episode. That's not in the book.
But at least with having kind of a somewhat sympathetic character, at least in, I'm going to try it, Captain von I lost it.
Schoenvort.
Schoenvort. Maybe you've got it in front of you, Aaron. I don't have it in front of me. But
I've been saying it for 50 years is why.
I can't. Yeah, I can't. I can't lodge that in the brain pan. But anyway, that also fits in with Moorcock's attitudes too, because just to be kind of a fly in the ointment, an imp of the perverse, in a lot of his novels, the Runestaff novels, he makes the Germans the good guys, and he makes the English the terrible, awful guys to make everything topsy-turvy.
Well, that's something that was kind of jarring in Warlords of Atlantis. The one scene in which the intelligent guy who they wanted to, what was his name? They wanted to keep him for their own because he was so advanced, although he knew none of their science. And I don't know why they thought he was so advanced, but he read a lot of books, I guess, but
it was the jacket.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. They showed him what their vision was and what they wanted to do, to humankind. And that was really kind of a shocker within the context of that film, but it was also pretty profound and pretty prophetic. And I think it's interesting in a film like that, like you said, that's so far out there. And I think, seems like an acid trip a lot of the time, really. It's just so crazy. And the sets are crazy. It's got that Star Trek set thing going and, so many things. And Sid Charisse, what is she doing in that film? What is happening there? She reminds me of Joan Crawford in Berserk. Like trying to show her legs off all the time. Like Sid Charisse is showing her legs off, but why else?
She's a dancer, so
I know. Side story. I know.
You can't have. It's like showing Channing Tatum and not having him take off his shirt. You got to do it.
I mean, it was just. I think her character was kind of sad the way it was written and everything else. It gave her nothing to do at all. Yeah. But that one thing was kind of stood out in the film. Sort of showing like this warring faction that's supposed to be so advanced, and they have these guys in these helmets and stuff like that, and they're kind of violent, and that's their whole like lofty aspiration, is to do like the humans do and keep that going, like perpetuate that. This is what we want to be, and that's kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm curious, you guys, what do you think Doug McClure's legacy film will be? Will it be Humanoids from the Deep, like 50 years from now? Which Doug McClure film will be actually still watched by
Aggressively Humanoids from the Deep?
Yeah.
I
think the exploitation elements keep it aloft and alive in the minds of folks.
But because it's called Humanoids from the Deep? That's a great title.
That and all the
also it's a rare example of feminist exploitation horror from that time, even though Roger Corman meddled with that. So like that makes it eternally somewhat relevant. And I think Humanoids from the Deep will be the one.
Okay. Well, how about Peter Cushing?
Will this be his legacy film at the year score?
At the year score, no.
I can't answer. Peter Cushing, 1,000 movies. Sadly, probably Star Wars, but in a fair world, it would be a Frankenstein movie, I think.
It could be Hound of the Baskervilles.
Right.
I mean, there's so many tremendous performances.
Could be Shockwaves. Yes.
Curse of Captain Clegg is an amazing Peter.
Yes, that too.
I think it's great that Shockwaves and At the Earth's Core came out the same year. I'm like, Peter's just having a banner year.
What's interesting about Doug McClure is that when you say what his legacy film is going to be, when this series started, Land That Time Forgot, he was already on the bottle a little bit, and he divorced his wife, so you could tell, and his performance was still pretty solid in that film, I think, and then as the series went on, by the time he got to Warlords of Atlantis, he reminded me of Charlton Heston imitating Dean Martin or something. He got to a point where he was like the rugged guy, but he was kind of he's kind of flipping off a lot of lines and sort of it was a very cavalier performance, and you can tell he had about had it at that point, I think.
Back to our question about where do some of the ideas for these films come from and things, not so much, but of course, Dana Gillespie in People That Time Forgot. What's her name? Alo, something like that. She, the very bodacious woman in the Tyrannosaurus skins. I'm almost wondering, this movie came out just about the same time that they introduced the character Leela on Doctor Who with Tom Baker.
Oh, interesting.
And she dresses a lot like Leela. And I kind of wonder if maybe there was a little bit of inspiration there. I don't know. I haven't read the book to see if that character shows up in there or not. But and speaking of Doctor Who and Peter Cushing, I thought he made a fine Doctor Who. He made a very different Doctor Who in his movies.
Yeah.
But
And I think
that,
similar to this character, like
yes.
he's a little goofier and lighter than we've seen him.
You know, I think Doctor Who has fingerprints all over all four of these movies. I think in a little way, maybe it's a British production. It's just similar crews or something, but I can feel it.
Well, since we're talking about things that came out the same year, like Patrick Wayne, who's the star of People That Time Forgot, that came out the year after he was it came out the same year as Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, where he's playing Sinbad.
I wish he was an actor that time forgot. But anyway, sorry. To me, and you can disagree, and I like an argument on this, he really just flattens out every film that he's in.
Well, I wouldn't even know about every film, but certainly this one, he's the least likable character in the whole movie. Like he's just kind of a jerk.
He's so unexpressive.
Throughout.
The Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, he's completely unexpressive.
I don't know, man. Have you seen The Warriors? That Michael guy and Xanadu?
Michael Beck.
Oh my God, the worst freaking actor on the planet. Once you got Michael Beck quality, you got to really work against it. You know?
I'm not saying he's the worst, but in films like this and Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, where you need a certain tone,
right? You need dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. He has nothing, and I'm not sure, except for being related to John Wayne. I'm not sure why he was ever chosen. I don't know his backstory of how he got into acting.
Well, what's funny is these films I hadn't seen. I'd seen Land of Time Forgot just because I like going back to it, but I hadn't seen At the Earth's Core and People of Time Forgot and Warlords in quite a while. And it was fun to see these kind of Hammer folks popping up, like Thorley Walters showing up in People That Time Forgot and Carolyn Monroe in At the Earth's Core. I loved seeing Michael Gothard in Warlords of Atlantis, from the Devils, Ken Russell's The Devils. I was like, holy mackerel. Like it's a really fun kind of like revisit of these actors who have dabbled in the genre or have made their name in the genre, and just seeing how they spent their mid 70s.
The 70s were cool, man. That's all I'm going to say. Let's end on that. The 70s were cool. People did all kinds of movies for all kinds of reasons, and they hit it out of the park more often than not.
Well, and I like that Kevin Connor just kept coming back to Doug McClure and saying, let's go do another one. Let's go do another one.
It feels like, I'm wearing a John Carpenter shirt, but it feels like a theater company, where you see the same actors over and over like you do with John Carpenter movies and Quentin Tarantino movies and things like that. I love that. That is so cool.
Yeah, or the old studio system, that did that. It does recall that, which is kind of nostalgic and nice. Yeah. And, I think that these films, as I remember, were pretty successful. Land of Time Forgot was very successful in the UK. I think it was like the 13th or 14th top grossing film of the year. Maybe it was At the Earth's Core at one point, or was it? No, maybe Land of Time Forgot. Actually, one of them was just below The Godfather 1 week in grossing, which is pretty amazing. But it was. I mean, so they made a lot of money, and I think that's why they kept going back to the same formula until it petered out in Warlords of Atlantis, obviously. But yeah.
Unless I am mistaken, you could probably use the same pteranodon that you had in Land of Time Forgot in The People That Time Forgot, couldn't you?
It was on the poster.
You could use the same pteranodon in the bathtub if you wanted to.
that thing is solid. You could use that thing right now. You could hammer nails with that thing. I love the fact that you got like in its mouth flying away.
That pteranodon was cool.
And I don't believe it for a second, but I love it.
I do.
You see the wires.
Had animation to it, unlike the first three that you see circling that are just toys.
Wasn't one proposed Hammer film called Zeppelins versus Pterodactyls?
Yes,
Pteranodons?
yes, they did. They did a lot of like art. You saw some nice pre-production art for that, and they did an announcement like they did with Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster film. They did these really elaborate announcements. With naked women, of course. And, it's all these projects that Hammer's going to do right before they folded. And that's one reason they folded, is they just had too many, investors and people on the line and stuff. And everybody said, you're never going to make this thing. And they never did, But yeah, that was Zeppelins versus Pterodactyls. That would have been something to see. Hopefully they wouldn't use the same pterodactyls as Amicus did. But.
The unmade Hammer Vampirella movie.
There you go.
Yep.
I have to add another science fact because it relates to the book. A big change from the book to the movie. You know how the compass is wrong because they put a magnet in it that would mess up a compass. In the book, the reason they're off course is that Caprona itself is magnetic,
Mm.
which, if that was the case, it would not be a lost island at all. Absolutely, everyone who'd ever sailed would have found this place, and we wouldn't have a reason to have the movie. So,
Well, I also like the fact that it takes them 6 days to realize they're going the wrong way. I'm like, really, guys? Like, did you
especially
not?
because the sun is what gives it away. Like they're
Yes.
experienced sailors, and they're like,
No, come on, 6 days. Anyway, that was, even as a kid, I was like going, guys, you might have checked the sun a little sooner.
It's all that Officer Dietz's fault. You know.
Oh man, he's the worst.
Dietz, yeah.
is he the guy who fist fights? Gets
Yep.
the fist fight.
Yep.
Yeah, that fist fight. We didn't talk about the fist fight. That fist fight was cool. Where he's like bragging about how great their commander is, and he's like, he's not very good against rescue boats though. And then it's just like, wow.
I just love that they beat the crap out of themselves, and everyone just stands there laughing with a very artificial laugh, like
Yep.
ho, 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 like a Santa Claus laugh.
It's fun.
Well,
And
Captain
they're
Von
fighting in
Short-
what looks like the La Brea tar pits.
right
That are on
Yeah.
fire.
Any final thoughts on The Land of Time Forgot, Amicus, Doug McClure, etc.?
I will just add that if you're listening to this podcast, go watch City of the Dead, the
Yep.
the first
Very good.
Amicus film,
Very
which for some god unknown reason they completely nail. An amazing fog-filled, scary town movie and about witches, and it is the only witch movie that I can honestly say I love. I will always love Milton Subotsky for that film.
Aaron, were you at the screening when I showed that or no?
I was.
We showed that. That
Yeah,
was our
we
first
did.
Super Horrorama with other witch films. But yeah, absolutely. And people who hadn't seen it were blown away because it is such an intense film.
I showed it to two newbies Halloween this past year, and everybody loved it. I mean, it's a hard film to hate. It's really good.
I'll just add that it's nice to be on a panel with all different age groups of people who can access and understand these films, these 4 films on a level unlike what Eli was talking about, which is something that really disturbs me probably more than it should. When people are always like, oh, that's so cheesy. Oh, that's so fakey. Oh, that's so this. I mean, you have to put yourself in the cultural context of the time and understand when the films were made, and then hopefully have a sense of disbelief or enough imagination to appreciate them. So it's great to be on a panel where everybody's on the same page. It really is. And that's what's great about these podcasts, Aaron, too. Like I said, is you had me go back and watch Warlords of Atlantis, which I hadn't seen since it came out.
Same.
I'll never forgive you for that. But no, I really enjoy it. I did love it. I did love it. But I mean, no, it's great that I can go back and revisit these things because I have to do my homework.
A quick aside again to At the Earth's Core, thought the Mahars, the sort of pterodactyl people in it that telepathically had people going out into the water and then ate them up, are probably some of the scariest boogeymen in these films. But as far as Land of Time Forgot, this is going to sound weird, but when I finally got to see it after seeing Ray Harryhausen movies, I was a little bit disappointed. And it's only lately I've really acquired a taste for the look of the monsters and things in this, and they seem, and I don't know if it was Barry or who said they're charming. They're they're a little bit scary, but you wouldn't petrify anybody. And I think the whole theme of it, besides just being a monster show, and because Eli, you could have dinosaurs from every era packed together in this without worrying about science because, well, they all intermingle. Plus, if you look at the sets, you have tropical vegetation and you've got temperate climate vegetation, but that kind of makes sense in the weird world that is. So you've got all that going for you. Plus, you've got the scientific approach of like, as you move forward, you go to these other areas where evolution is getting higher and higher and higher. And what did the two of them find when they got to the end? Well, they wound up in the
they found love.
They found love, but they also wound up in the cave of skulls, in the people that time forgot, with the pseudo samurai warriors and things. So it has a little bit more of an overarching theme and kind of a sad ending that is a little bit different than standard kiddie fare, I would say.
Oh yeah, the melancholy quality is something that has always stuck with me. Like, again, I thought the ending of that movie was just poetry. I was like, wow, it's so great. Eli.
If I had to add anything on at the end here, it would be that pterosaurs and plesiosaurs are not dinosaurs, and that Allosaurus was much smaller than the creature that appears in the movie by a lot. Like that is a Godzilla-sized creature in the film. What Barry was saying about special effects, I'm sort of clowning with my dinosaur facts here, but you got to learn, you got to love movies like this when you go into them. You have to look at the illusion that they're creating and judge it by what they set out to do. And so, like, yeah, I gave the pterodactyl a lot of shit because they broke the promise with the pterodactyl. But everywhere else in this movie, the special effects do not break the promise. And that's what's so great about it. And it allows your imagination to run if you go on the journey that they've presented you.
Yeah.
So there's nothing worse than going to see an old movie with a bunch of kids who think it's just funny because it's old. And I felt that way since I was a kid. So I just hate that. So
I do have to jump in here real quick and point out, I think it was Eli who broke my heart when he told me that my favorite dinosaur, the Dimetrodon, was not a dinosaur. So
it's not.
That's what Eli does. He just goes around shattering dreams. And
you guys want to see a
cool sail on its back? Oh, man.
Eli, you mean to tell me that model kit I made, that Aurora model kit of the prehistoric scenes dinosaur, was not a dinosaur?
I don't know. No, Dimetrodon is not a dinosaur. Gravest apologies. It's actually more closely related to you than it is a dinosaur. It was yeah, maybe that's why you have such an affinity for it. But it was extinct long before the dinosaurs hit the scene, my guy. So yeah.
Oh wow, thank you.
Just to dovetail on what you were saying, Eli, I think it is about the art of storytelling, and I think coming at it from that approach, as does this tell the story? Do the effects tell the story? And that's really what we're looking for. It isn't about the realism; it's about how are you going to tell this? I mean, watching an animated movie isn't realism. You know, it's not, I'm not seeing something that exists in the real world. That you can't tell me that kids don't love seeing animated films and that adults don't love seeing animated films. So I think this is just kind of a different way of storytelling. And I do hope that people do kind of meet it on its own terms and enjoy it for what it is. We got this far and we didn't even talk about the fact that I love the fact that Amicus, you know, we said that they were branching out, but they started off doing the anthology films because they were inexpensive. And this kind of marks their big swing. And for me, it was a swing and a hit. And I've loved it for 50 years, and I'm going to plan on loving it for another 50 more.
It definitely stuck with me. You know, I have to say, even though I didn't see it since the 70s, I remembered it. I remembered when I was watching it this week, I was like, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. It has a thing. It really does.
Every kid, all the way down into, from my personal experience, my grandnieces and nephews, everybody loves dinosaurs. Everybody, especially grown-up kids, they retain that.
And the real dinosaurs are the friends we made along the
way. Thank you all so much. This is a great conversation, and looking forward to having you all on again very soon. Till next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.